Okay, I want to start with a number that, frankly, doesn't quite make sense to me. $250 million.
It's a massive number.
I mean, that's the global box office for the movie adaptation of The Housemaid. And the reason I say it doesn't make sense is, we're not talking about a Marvel movie here.
Right.
We're not talking about a legacy franchise like James Bond or even like a Stephen King thing that's been around for 40 years. This is a domestic thriller.
It puts it in a very rare company. If you look at the genre, you've got Gone Girl, you have The Girl on a Train, and now you have The Housemaid. It's basically a blockbuster from a source that, until pretty recently, Hollywood would have just, I think, overlooked.
Right, and that's the whole deep dive today. We're not just looking at the movie. We're trying to get at the architect behind it all, Freida McFadden.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually when an author hits that $250 million mark, the story kind of follows a specific script. They move to some gated community. They start doing lunch meetings with Spielberg. They become this untouchable cultural figure.
The whole literary celebrity model, yeah.
But looking at the research you've pulled, and this is mostly from a new interview from February 2026, Freida McFadden seems to be doing, everything in her power to reject that script.
It's a complete paradox. You have the brand, Freida McFadden, which is this global entertainment juggernaut, and then you have the actual person who is, right now, sitting in a house in Massachusetts, snowed in, and probably worrying about her next shift at the hospital.
And that is not a metaphor. She is like literally a practicing physician.
She is, and I think that's really where we have to start if we want to understand any of this. Most people treat writing as the side gig until it makes enough money to become the main thing.
Sure.
McFadden has generated enough wealth to retire, 10 times over, and she still calls writing her side hustle.
So that's our mission today. We want to unpack that.
Yeah.
How does an introverted doctor become a global thriller phenomenon without quitting her day job? And more importantly, why hasn't she quit?
We're going to look at the psychology of her double life, her incredibly unprecious writing process, and a really interesting publishing strategy that I think explains why she grew so fast.
Let's start with the identity piece, because Freida McFadden, that's not her real name.
No. And in the interview, she kind of breaks down this triad of identities she has. To friends and family, she's her real first name. At the hospital, she's just Doctor.
Just Doctor.
And to the rest of us, to the world, she's Freida.
It feels a little bit like a superhero thing, doesn't it? Clark Kent putting on the glasses. But I have to ask, is this just about privacy? Because, if I'm a patient and I find out my doctor spends her nights writing about gruesome murders,
yeah,
I might feel a little uneasy during my next checkup.
That's a totally valid reaction, but she sees it differently. For her, it's less about hiding and more about cognitive compartmentalization. She actually told the interviewer, calling me by these different names helps me be more professional.
It feels like a trigger.
Exactly. It's a psychological uniform. When someone calls her doctor, her brain just shifts into that clinical mode assessment, diagnosis, empathy.
Right.
But when she sits down and becomes Freida, that clinical empathy sort of turns off, and the part of her brain that builds these twisted plots turns on. If she blurred those lines, she thinks she'd actually be worse at both jobs.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like wearing a suit to work versus sweatpants at home. The clothes tell your brain how to act.
Yeah.
But she's taking it a step further. She's not just wearing the doctor hat for show. She's actually still working.
Well, as of early 2026, she's on a brief hiatus, but only because of the, snowed-in weather up in New England and all the movie press. She's very clear that she plans to go back as soon as the snow clears. She just said, I like it and don't want to stop doing it.
See, that's the part I just can't get my head around. If I had a movie making $250 million, you would never see me in a hospital again unless I was the one in the bed. Why keep all that stress?
I think it comes down to being grounded. Writing, especially fiction, is a very unmoored profession. You're just making stuff up. You're inside your own head all day.
True.
Medicine is the total opposite. It's tangible. The stakes are incredibly high. It's real. And she mentions that having that real job gives her a kind of structure that keeps her from floating away into that celebrity bubble.
It also probably provides a ton of material. Her first book was The Devil Wears Scrubs back in 2013, which is, obviously drawn from her life.
It gives her a huge advantage in the thriller genre. Authenticity. When you read a scene in one of her books set in a hospital, she didn't just research it on Wikipedia, she lived it. She says she has that knowledge in her back pocket.
Although she did share a pretty funny story about the limits of that knowledge.
Oh, right, the antibiotic incident.
Yeah. she wrote a scene where a character gets a specific dose of an antibiotic.
Yeah.
And she didn't look it up because, she's a doctor. She knows this stuff. And then a friend of hers, a physician's assistant, reads the book and just texts her, that dose is wrong.
Which I love because it shows that expertise is often narrower than we think. Just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you have every single drug interaction memorized.
But it also shows her lack of ego.
Yeah.
She didn't get defensive. She just thought it was hilarious.
That lack of ego seems to be a real recurring theme. We have to talk about her writing environment because, earlier we mentioned that literary celebrity doing lunch with Spielberg.
Right.
And we also have this other image of the serious writer who needs, like, a cabin in the woods, total silence, maybe a view of a lake.
Freida McFadden just blows that myth completely out of the water.
She writes on the couch.
On the couch.
In the living room. With the door open.
It's wild to me. She has teenagers. I don't know if you've been around teenagers lately, but quiet is not the word I would use.
No. But she prioritizes being accessible over having the perfect atmosphere. She said, I actually work on the couch just because I like to be around for everyone. If she locked herself away, she'd miss her kids' lives.
So she adapted her creative process to fit her life, not the other way around.
Exactly.
But practically, how does that even work? You can't write a really complex thriller in, 5-minute bursts while you're yelling at your kid to take out the trash.
Okay, so this is where her binge strategy comes in. And I think this is a really important takeaway for anyone who feels guilty about not writing every single day. The common advice is always write every day.
Right, 500 words before breakfast.
Yeah.
The grind.
Freida doesn't do that. She calls herself a non-procrastinator, but she's a binger, so she might go days without writing anything. But when she gets a block of time, like a Saturday, she will sit on that couch and just write for 6 or 7 hours straight.
She just gets into the flow state and stays there.
Precisely. She's not chipping away at the mountain. She's dynamiting it in these massive chunks. And for a busy professional like a doctor, that makes so much more sense than trying to squeeze in 20 minutes here and there. It lets her hold the entire plot in her head at once.
So she's binging the writing, and the world is binging the result. Which I guess brings us back to the Housemaid movie. Directed by Paul Feig, screenplay by Rebecca Sonnenschein. She went to the premiere in New York.
Which she described as nerve-wracking. You have to remember, despite all the success, she still sees herself as an introvert. The red carpet is basically an exposure therapy session for her.
I can imagine. But she liked the movie, said it captured the fun of the book. But here's the interesting part. There's a sequel coming, obviously.
Yeah.
A $250 million movie guarantees a sequel.
It's Hollywood law at that point.
But Freida's involvement, pretty much zero. She basically just said, I don't know how to make movies, so I'm not going to try.
Which is so rare. Usually an author this big starts demanding creative control. Script approval, casting approval, all of it. They get very protective.
The J.K. Rowling effect.
Right. But Freida has this sort of pragmatic humility. She gets the division of labor. She writes the books. They make the movies. She knows her skill set, diagnosing patients and plotting twists, doesn't translate to film production.
It's just comparative advantage.
Yeah.
She's better off spending her time writing the next book than arguing about camera angles.
Exactly. And speaking of the next book, while the movie is breaking records, she's launching her latest, Dear Debbie.
And this one sounds, well, let's just say it sounds pretty intense.
It's definitely a darker turn.
The premise is this suburban mom who's an advice columnist. On the surface, she's the perfect neighbor, but underneath, she's just completely unraveling. And Freida admitted something that gave me a bit of a pause. She said the character is semi-autobiographical.
I think we can assume the semi part is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I don't think Freida's actually murdering her neighbors.
Right.
But the emotion behind it, that's real.
She called it an alternate universe where she just snaps.
And we are seeing this theme of female rage becoming so dominant in pop culture right now. You see it in shows like Beef or Yellow Jackets. Freida is really tapping into that specific pressure cooker of being a high-achieving woman.
She used this analogy about road rage that I think everyone can relate to. She said when someone cuts you off in traffic, you have this flash of just primal anger. You want justice. You want them to pay. But in real life, you can't do anything. You just sit there and grip the steering wheel.
Right. Society demands you suppress it, especially if you're a doctor or a mother. You have to be the quote-unquote adult. You have to de-escalate.
But in fiction?
In fiction, the rules don't apply. You can cut that person off. You can get revenge. Freida calls it cathartic. Dear Debbie lets her and the reader visit that world where the polite veneer finally cracks, but without any actual consequences.
It's safer to read about the explosion than to be the explosion.
That's the whole point of the thriller genre, really. It's a pressure valve.
Speaking of the genre, Freida is obviously a titan of it now, but she credits Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl with really opening the door for this kind of story.
She does. She acknowledges Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca as kind of the OG domestic thriller, but she points to Gone Girl as the moment the genre became modern pop culture. That shifted the focus from just whodunit to who are these people I'm living with.
But here's a twist I didn't see coming. Freida McFadden, the woman who spends her life building these dark, twisted plots, isn't reading thrillers right now.
She's totally burned out on them.
She's reading historical fiction and listening to cozy mysteries like Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it. If you're a chef, you don't go home and cook a 5-course meal for yourself. You eat a bowl of cereal.
It's a palate cleanser.
Totally. If she spent all her downtime reading dark domestic thrillers, her brain would never get a break from that specific kind of problem solving. By switching to historical fiction, she's using a different part of her imagination. It keeps the thriller muscle fresh for when she actually needs it.
So we've covered the doctor persona, the binge writing, the movie success. But I want to circle back to something we touched on at the start. Her publishing strategy. Because Freida didn't start with a big New York publishing deal. She started on Amazon KDP.
And this is where her just do it philosophy gets really, really interesting. It's not just some motivational slogan for her. It's a whole business model.
She gave this piece of advice that sounds almost dangerous. She said, stop worrying if it's perfect.
To a perfectionist, that sounds like heresy. But she backs it up with a revelation that I think is the biggest nugget in this whole deep dive. She admits that some of her early books didn't work.
And most authors would just bury those books or, pretend they don't exist.
Free to fix them.
After they were already published.
Yes, she literally went back, re-edited them, fixed plot holes, and then just updated the files on Amazon.
Okay, let's just pause on that. Is that allowed? It feels a little like George Lucas going back and adding CGI to the original Star Wars. If I bought the book in 2015 and I had a plot hole, and now the 2026 version is fixed, did I get, like, a defective product?
It's a fascinating ethical question, for sure. In traditional publishing, once a book is printed, it's static. It's done. A mistake lives forever, or at least until a second edition years down the line. But digital publishing treats books more like software.
Living software.
Exactly. Think of it like a video game. You release the game, players find bugs, and then the developers release a patch to fix it. Freida treats her books like software version 1.0, then 1.1, then 1.2.
So her argument is basically, I never would have known what to fix if I hadn't published it in the first place.
That is the key. If she had waited until the books were perfect to publish them, she probably never would have published them at all. Or she would have spent 10 years on one book instead of building a backlist of 20 books. She chose momentum over perfection.
It's the Silicon Valley approach applied to literature. Move fast and break things. Or in her case, move fast and fix things later.
And clearly the market doesn't seem to mind. I think readers would rather have a prolific author who improves over time than an author who releases one perfect book every decade.
It also explains how she built such a massive audience so quickly. The algorithm loves frequency. By publishing, getting data, fixing, and publishing again, she was feeding the machine in a way that traditional authors just can't.
She leveraged that digital ecosystem perfectly, and that brings us back to her just do it advice. It's not about being reckless. It's about realizing that in the modern world, publish doesn't mean final, it just means available.
I love that distinction. So pulling this all together, we have a doctor who writes on her couch, ignores the mess, publishes before she's ready, and then fixes it later. And the result of all that is a $250 million movie.
And a life that she actually seems to enjoy living. That's the part we shouldn't overlook. She hasn't blown up her entire life to chase fame. She has integrated the fame into the life she already had.
She didn't buy the mansion in L.A. She stayed in the snow in Massachusetts.
Because that's where her reality is. And keeping a foot in reality is probably the healthiest thing a writer can do.
So what does this mean for you? Listening to this, I mean, maybe you're not writing a thriller. Maybe you're not a doctor.
I think the lesson is about personas and integration. We often feel like we have to be just one thing. I'm an accountant. I'm a parent. Freida proves you can be multiple things at once, as long as you have clear boundaries, or uniforms, as we said, for each role.
That idea of the uniform Freida versus doctor, it really is a tool that I think anyone can use.
Absolutely. Maybe you need a negotiator persona for when you have to deal with a difficult client. Maybe you need a deep work persona for when you just need to focus. Giving it a name or even a little ritual can help you switch gears just like she does.
And maybe, just maybe, you need to lower the bar for perfection a little bit and just hit publish on whatever project you're holding back. You can always release a patch later.
Version 1.0 is infinitely better than version 0.6.
I think that's the perfect place to leave it. Version 1.0 is better than nothing. Thanks for diving deep with us into the double life of Freida McFadden.
See you next time.